In the depths of the Royal Geographic Society's archives in London, sealed within a temperature-controlled vault that maintains the precise conditions necessary for preserving photographic materials from the early 20th century, lies an image that has haunted polar historians for over a century. The photograph, developed from a glass plate negative discovered in a damaged camera, found protruding from the Antarctic ice in 1975, represents the final documented evidence of the Harrington Polar Expedition of 1912, one of the most ambitious and ultimately tragic attempts to reach the South Pole during the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. The image captures 5 men standing in a loose formation against the backdrop of a merciless Antarctic blizzard. Their faces are barely visible beneath layers of frost-covered woolen balaclavas and primitive snow goggles, but their posture speaks of exhaustion, determination, and something else that modern viewers have struggled to identify. There is a tension in their stance, a quality of alertness that suggests they were aware of something beyond the camera's immediate field of vision, something that required their constant vigilance, even in this moment of documentation. Dr. Evelyn Marsh, the expedition's photographer and navigator, stands at the center of the group, her heavy camera equipment visible beside her in the snow. Captain James Harrington, the expedition's leader, is positioned to her right, his hand resting on the ice axe that had become his constant companion during their 3-month journey across the Ross Ice Shelf. To her left stand the remaining members of the team: Thomas Whitley, the expedition's geologist and mapmaker, Father Michael Donovan, who served as both chaplain and medical officer, and young William Preston, barely 22 years old, whose role as the expedition's cook and general assistant had evolved into something far more vital as their supplies dwindled and their situation became increasingly desperate. What makes this photograph extraordinary is not simply its historical significance as the last record of 5 brave souls who vanished into the white void of Antarctica, never to be seen again. What has made this image the subject of intense scientific scrutiny and heated debate for over 4 decades is what modern digital enhancement techniques have revealed lurking in the background of the photograph, hidden within the swirling snow and shadows that seemed to the original viewers to be nothing more than the natural chaos of an Antarctic storm. Professor Adrian Blackthorne of Cambridge University first noticed the anomalies in 2018 while conducting research for his comprehensive study of early Antarctic photography. Working with high-resolution scans and advanced image processing software originally developed for satellite reconnaissance, Professor Blackthorne began to isolate and enhance different elements of the photograph, hoping to extract additional information about the expedition's final location and the conditions they faced during their last days. What he discovered defied rational explanation and challenged everything the scientific community thought it knew about the fate of the Harrington expedition. Hidden within the blizzard that rages behind the 5 explorers, barely visible to the naked eye, but undeniably present when subjected to digital enhancement, are shapes that should not exist in any natural Antarctic landscape. Pale, elongated forms that move through the snow with an intelligence and purpose that suggests they are not merely products of wind and ice. Faces that peer out from the white chaos, human in their basic structure, but wrong in ways that the human mind struggles to process. The most disturbing discovery came when Professor Blackthorne isolated the background elements and applied spectral analysis to determine their composition and origin. The shapes in the snow registered as having a different temperature signature than the surrounding ice and wind, appearing warmer than their environment, despite existing in conditions that should have frozen any living tissue within minutes. More impossibly still, the faces visible in the storm showed signs of movement between exposures, as if they had been captured in the process of shifting position during the long exposure time required by early 20th century photography. The Harrington Polar Expedition had begun with the highest hopes and the most meticulous preparation that 1912 could offer. Captain James Harrington was a veteran of 2 previous Antarctic expeditions and had spent 5 years planning this attempt to reach the South Pole via an unexplored route through the Queen Maud Mountains. His team had been carefully selected for their expertise, physical endurance, and psychological stability, and they had departed from New Zealand in October 1911 with enough supplies to sustain them for 18 months in the Antarctic wilderness. Their mission was both scientific and patriotic, intended to plant the British flag at the South Pole, while conducting comprehensive geological surveys and meteorological observations that would advance human understanding of the world's most hostile continent. The expedition was funded by a combination of government grants, private donations, and sponsorships from companies eager to associate their names with British exploration and scientific achievement. For the first 8 months, everything proceeded according to plan. Regular radio communications with their base camp reported steady progress across the Ross Ice Shelf, successful establishment of supply depots, and the discovery of several previously unknown geological formations that promised to yield valuable scientific data. Captain Harrington's dispatches were optimistic, professional, and filled with the sort of detailed observations that characterized the best of early Antarctic exploration. The last radio transmission from the expedition was received on March 15, 1912, exactly 112 years ago. Captain Harrington reported that they had reached the foothills of the Queen Maud Mountains and were preparing to begin their ascent toward the polar plateau. He noted that the weather had been unusually severe, with temperatures dropping to -40 degrees Fahrenheit and winds exceeding 60 miles per hour, but expressed confidence that they would reach their objective within 6 weeks. What happened next remained a complete mystery for more than 60 years. Search expeditions launched in 1913 and 1914 found no trace of the Harrington team, despite covering thousands of square miles of Antarctic terrain. The approaching First World War diverted resources and attention away from polar exploration, and the fate of the 5 men gradually faded from public consciousness, becoming just another tragic footnote in the history of Antarctic exploration. The breakthrough came in February 1975, when a routine geological survey team working in the Queen Maud Mountains discovered a section of ice that contained dark objects embedded at various depths. Careful excavation revealed these to be the remains of the Harrington expedition's final camp, preserved in pristine condition by 7 decades of Antarctic cold. The team's equipment, personal effects, and scientific instruments were recovered largely intact, along with Dr. Marsh's camera case containing the undeveloped glass plate negatives that would provide the first clues to their mysterious fate. When the negatives were finally developed, they revealed a photographic record of the expedition's final weeks that painted a picture of increasing desperation and growing awareness that they were facing threats beyond the natural dangers of Antarctic exploration. The early photographs showed the team in good spirits, documenting their scientific discoveries and the breathtaking landscapes they encountered during their approach to the mountains. But as the sequence progressed, the images began to tell a darker story. The photographs from the expedition's final week showed men who were clearly under extreme stress, constantly looking over their shoulders, setting up camp in defensive formations that made no sense for protection against weather or natural predators. Most disturbing of all were the images that appeared to have been taken hastily, without proper composition or focus, as if Dr. Marsh had been trying to document something that the camera could see, but human eyes could not fully comprehend. The final photograph in the sequence, the image that would become the subject of Professor Blackthorne's analysis, was clearly taken in conditions of extreme urgency. The camera angle suggests that Dr. Marsh was kneeling in the snow, possibly hidden behind an ice formation, and the exposure settings indicate that she was working in near darkness, despite the timestamp suggesting the photograph was taken during what should have been Antarctic daylight hours. Professor Blackthorne's enhancement of this final image revealed details that transformed it from a historical document into evidence of something far more sinister than death by exposure or starvation. The 5 men visible in the photograph are not simply posing for a final portrait. They are clearly in defensive positions, their equipment arranged in a rough circle around Dr. Marsh's camera position. Captain Harrington's ice axe is raised as if prepared to strike, and the expressions visible beneath their frost-covered headgear suggest fear and desperation rather than the resigned acceptance typically associated with explorers facing death in extreme conditions. But it was the background of the photograph that provided the most chilling revelations. As Professor Blackthorne applied increasingly sophisticated enhancement techniques, the shapes moving through the blizzard began to resolve into forms that challenged everything the scientific community thought it knew about Antarctic wildlife and the limits of human survival in extreme cold. The entities visible in the enhanced image appeared to be humanoid in basic structure, but possessed characteristics that defied biological explanation. They moved through the blizzard without any apparent protection against the freezing temperatures, their pale forms visible through gaps in the swirling snow. Most disturbing of all were their faces, which showed expressions of intelligence and malevolent purpose that suggested these were not simply unknown animals or hallucinations brought on by hypothermia and starvation. The shapes appeared to be surrounding the expedition's final camp, moving in coordinated patterns that suggested pack hunting behavior or military tactics. Some of the entities seemed to be emerging from beneath the snow itself, as if they had been lying in wait under the ice until the expedition arrived at their predetermined location. Others appeared to be descending from higher elevations, moving down the mountainside with impossible speed and agility, despite the treacherous conditions. Dr. Sarah Kendrick, a specialist in extreme environment biology at Oxford University, was brought in to analyze the enhanced images and provide a scientific explanation for what Professor Blackthorne had discovered. Her initial assumption was that the shapes represented known Antarctic wildlife captured under unusual lighting conditions, possibly seals or penguins that had wandered far from their usual habitats. But as she studied the enhanced images more closely, she was forced to abandon this rational explanation in favor of theories that challenged the fundamental assumptions of biological science. The entities visible in the Harrington photograph display characteristics that are inconsistent with any known form of Antarctic life, Dr. Kendrick wrote in her official report. They appear to be active in temperature conditions that would be immediately fatal to any known mammal, and their movement patterns suggest cognitive abilities and social organization that exceed those of any documented polar species. Most disturbingly, they seem to be actively stalking the expedition members, demonstrating predatory behavior that is both intelligent and coordinated. The revelation that the Harrington expedition had encountered unknown entities in the Antarctic wilderness led to a comprehensive review of other historical polar expeditions and their documented experiences. What emerged from this research was a pattern of encounters that had been dismissed or suppressed for over a century, a hidden history of polar exploration that revealed humanity was not alone in the world's most remote regions. Ernest Shackleton's 1914 expedition had reported strange sounds coming from beneath the ice during their long winter trapped in the Weddell Sea. Sounds that crew members described as singing or calling that seemed to emanate from deep underground. Robert Falcon Scott's final diary, entries from his doomed 1912 expedition, contained references to watchers in the snow and pale forms that follow at a distance, though these passages had been dismissed by historians as hallucinations brought on by extreme stress and malnutrition. Even earlier expeditions had encountered similar phenomena. Captain James Cook's voyage to the Antarctic Circle in 1774 included reports of strange lights beneath the ice and forms that moved like men but were not men, observed by multiple crew members during their brief landing on what is now known as South Georgia Island. These accounts had been relegated to maritime folklore, dismissed as the product of imagination and superstition, but when viewed in the context of the Harrington photograph, they began to form a coherent pattern of encounters with entities that had inhabited the Antarctic regions long before human exploration began. The most comprehensive account came from the private journal of Dr. Edward Wilson, who served as physician and zoologist on Scott's final expedition. Wilson's journal, discovered in 2019 during renovation of his family's estate, contained detailed observations of what he termed the Pale Watchers, entities that he had observed following Scott's team during their final approach to the South Pole. According to Wilson's account, these beings appeared to be highly intelligent and possessed of technologies or abilities that allowed them to survive in conditions that would kill any known form of life within minutes. They seemed to be territorial, becoming increasingly aggressive as human expeditions penetrated deeper into the Antarctic interior, and they displayed hunting behaviors that suggested they viewed human explorers as either prey or threats to be eliminated. Wilson's journal included detailed sketches of the entities he had observed, drawings that matched with remarkable accuracy the shapes visible in the enhanced Harrington photograph. The beings appeared to be tall and extremely pale, with elongated limbs and faces that retained human characteristics, while being clearly non-human in origin. Their eyes were described as being completely black, without visible pupils or irises, and they moved with a gliding motion that suggested they were not bound by normal physical limitations. Most chilling of all were Wilson's observations about their behavior patterns. The entities appeared to be capable of remaining motionless beneath the snow for extended periods, emerging only when human expeditions entered their territory. They showed no fear of human weapons or equipment, but they seemed to be vulnerable to certain forms of light, particularly the magnesium flares that were commonly used by early Antarctic expeditions for illumination and signaling. The connection between the Harrington expedition's fate and these historical accounts became clearer when Professor Blackthorne discovered additional evidence hidden within the expedition's recovered equipment. Chemical analysis of ice samples found in the team's water containers revealed traces of compounds that do not occur naturally in Antarctic ice, substances that appeared to be organic in origin but unlike anything produced by known terrestrial life forms. More disturbing still were the artifacts discovered among Captain Harrington's personal effects. Hidden within a sealed compartment of his pack was a collection of items that appeared to be trophies or specimens, fragments of pale, translucent material that resembled bone but possessed properties that defied classification, small objects that seemed to be tools or ornaments of unknown purpose, and most mysteriously, a series of photographs that appeared to have been taken by someone other than Dr. Marsh. These additional photographs showed the Harrington expedition from perspectives that would have been impossible for any member of the team to achieve. The images appeared to have been taken from elevated positions or from within the blizzard itself, and they showed the expedition members in their final moments, clearly aware that they were being hunted but unable to identify or defend against their pursuers. The final photograph in this hidden collection showed the expedition's camp during what appeared to be the final assault. The tents had been shredded, equipment was scattered across the ice, and dark stains in the snow suggested violence that went far beyond anything that could be attributed to natural causes. Most impossibly of all, the photograph appeared to have been taken from directly above the camp, as if the photographer had been floating in the air or positioned on a structure that left no trace in the surrounding snow. The discovery of these additional photographs raised questions that the scientific community has been unable to answer. Who or what had taken these images? How had they come to be in Captain Harrington's possession? And most disturbing of all, what had happened to the expedition members after this final documentation of their fate? The answer came from an unexpected source. In 2020, a climate research team working in the Queen Maud Mountains discovered a series of ice caves that had been revealed by recent glacial melting. Deep within these caves, they found what appeared to be a preserved settlement or base camp, constructed using materials and techniques that bore no resemblance to any known form of human architecture. The structures within the caves appeared to have been carved directly from the ice, using tools that left marks unlike anything produced by conventional equipment. The chambers were connected by tunnels that extended far deeper into the glacier than modern drilling equipment could penetrate, and the walls were covered with markings that resembled writing or symbolic communication, but followed no linguistic patterns known to human science. Most significantly, the research team discovered what appeared to be a storage area containing artifacts and specimens from multiple human expeditions spanning more than a century. Among these preserved items were personal effects from the Harrington expedition, including Dr. Marsh's missing camera equipment and Captain Harrington's journal, which contained entries describing their final encounters with the entities that had stalked them across the ice. According to Harrington's final entries, the expedition had become aware that they were being followed during their third week in the Queen Maud Mountains. The entities had initially maintained their distance, visible only as shapes moving through the blizzards that seemed to follow the expedition wherever they went. But as the team penetrated deeper into what Harrington described as forbidden territory, the Watchers had become increasingly bold and aggressive. The captain's account described encounters that challenged every assumption about survival in extreme environments. The entities appeared to be immune to the cold that was slowly killing the human explorers, and they demonstrated technologies or abilities that allowed them to move through ice and snow as if these substances offered no resistance. They seemed to communicate through sounds that human ears could barely detect, subsonic frequencies that caused disorientation and fear in anyone who heard them. Most terrifying of all were Harrington's descriptions of the entities' apparent interest in the expedition members themselves. Rather than simply driving the humans away from their territory, the Watchers seemed to be studying them, observing their behavior and capabilities, with the methodical attention of scientists conducting research. Several expedition members reported waking to find that their equipment had been moved or examined during the night, and on more than one occasion, they discovered footprints around their camp that belonged to no known form of life. The final entry in Harrington's journal, dated March 20th, 1912, 5 days after their last radio transmission, described the expedition's desperate attempt to escape from what had become a coordinated hunt. The entities had revealed themselves in full force, emerging from ice caves and crevasses that the expedition had believed to be natural formations. The Watchers had surrounded the team's final camp, cutting off all escape routes and demonstrating technologies that allowed them to manipulate the ice and snow itself as weapons. "They are not merely predators," Harrington wrote in his final words, "they are collectors. They seek to preserve us, as we have sought to preserve specimens of their world. We have become the subjects of their research, and I fear that death will not bring us the release we seek." Dr. Marsh believes that her camera may be our only hope of warning future expeditions if her final photographs survive to tell our story. The implications of these discoveries have forced the international scientific community to reconsider fundamental assumptions about life in extreme environments and the history of human exploration in polar regions. The evidence suggests that Antarctica harbors forms of life that have remained hidden from human awareness for centuries, entities that possess intelligence and technologies that far exceed current human capabilities. More disturbing still is the suggestion that these beings have been actively studying human expeditions, collecting specimens and artifacts for purposes that remain completely unknown. The ice caves discovered in 2020 contained evidence of at least 12 different expeditions, spanning from the early 19th century to the present day, suggesting that the disappearance of polar explorers may not be the result of natural hazards, but of deliberate capture by entities whose motivations and capabilities remain beyond human understanding. The Harrington photograph has become the centerpiece of a new field of study that combines traditional archaeology with xenobiology and theoretical physics. Researchers are working to understand not only what these entities are and where they come from, but also what their long-term presence in Antarctica might mean for human exploration and scientific research in polar regions. Dr. Marsh's final photograph serves as both a historical document and a warning to future expeditions. The enhanced image reveals a moment of terror and desperation as 5 brave explorers faced an enemy they could neither understand nor defeat, their final act being an attempt to document the threat for those who would come after them. The pale faces emerging from the blizzard are not merely optical illusions or pareidolia, but evidence of an intelligence that has claimed the Antarctic wilderness as its own territory and will defend it against human intrusion with methods that defy our understanding of biology and physics. The modern analysis of this 112-year-old photograph has opened a door to mysteries that humanity may not be ready to comprehend. In the swirling snow and hidden shapes of Dr. Marsh's final image, we see evidence that we are not alone on this planet, that there are forms of life and intelligence that have existed in the shadows of human exploration, watching and waiting and collecting evidence of our presence, while remaining invisible to our limited perceptions. The fate of the Harrington expedition serves as a reminder that there are still frontiers where humanity ventures at its own peril, territories claimed by beings whose existence challenges everything we think we know about life, intelligence, and our place in the hierarchy of earthly existence. In the depths of the Antarctic ice, ancient watchers continue their vigil, and every expedition that ventures into their domain risks becoming the subject of their mysterious and terrifying research. The true nature of what lurks beneath the Antarctic ice remains as hidden today as it was in 1912, but we want to know your thoughts. Use the comments section below and tell us what you believe happened to the Harrington expedition and whether you think there are unknown forms of life inhabiting the world's most remote regions. If you're fascinated by unraveling the secrets behind history's darkest mysteries, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell, because there are many more enigmas waiting to be uncovered, hidden in the shadows of the past, waiting for someone brave enough to bring them into the light.